Very good. Mr. President, how are you? Very good.
Okay, so welcome everyone to our October Finance Committee meeting. A little bit after 7 o'clock, I think all the necessary parties are here, so let's get started. First thing we do here at Finance is we go over the minutes and see if anybody has any comments on the minutes. Good?
So content is good, just one
Oh, that's right, yes.
one names that needs an E on the end of it, and that would be Patty Benson. She spells it P-A-T-T-Y-E.
Okay. All right, so with that, we will get into our monthly and year-to-date financial report. Beth, why don't you kick us off?
Tonight I have the treasurer's report for October 2019, starting with the revenues. The September year-to-date, sorry, I'll start again. Sorry. Tonight I have the treasurer's report for October of 2019. Starting with the revenues, the September year-to-date revenue is reported on page 5 of the treasurer's report. To date, 78% of the budgeted general fund revenues have been collected, which is in line with prior year collections for the same period. This is in line, as I said, this is in line with the prior year collections that were collected at 77% of the budget for the same period. September revenue is in line, as we said, with prior year collections, but there's one exception, that would be real estate transfer tax. The year-to-date transfer tax includes $710,500 in revenue related to the transfer of a property in the Chesterbrook Corporate Center and $478,730 in revenue related to the transfer of a property in the Valley Forge Office Center. These transfers are driving the transfer tax collections higher than prior year collections for the same period. Moving on to expenditures, the September year-to-date expenditures are detailed on page 6 of the treasurer's report. And to date, 15% of the budgeted general fund expenditures have been expended. And this is in line with the spending for the same period last year.
Okay. Thanks, Beth. thanks for that. Why don't we focus on just that part of the report for now? We'll see if, by the way, like those transactions, let's keep those coming. Like that additional transfer tax. So if there's anything you can do about that. But with that in mind, I'd turn to the committee to see if anybody has any questions on our September financial report. Yeah, sure, Chuck.
The question I just had was, on page 5, under income, item 6990, advertising revenue, it looks like we budgeted 0 for that. Can you explain why we budgeted 0 for advertising revenue?
No, I cannot explain why, but I can definitely look into it. Yeah.
I'm just looking at the breakdown here. I think everything got rolled up into this place, so it may just be a matter of breaking it out.
Might be listed somewhere else. And
No, I think it's all in 6995, which is not.
Oh,
broken out.
miscellaneous
Statements,
revenue.
I just
Gotcha.
didn't see it broken out on the sheet.
okay,
But we'll take a look at that.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Rest of the board?
Council the board is here. Any public questions on our monthly report? Okay, so thank you, Beth, for that. As we previewed last month, one of the other things that we're going to do in terms of a monthly financial report is we're going to have a monthly report on special education expenditures, because that is something that folks on the board have requested, because it's one of our major cost centers, and we'd like to be able to probably keep track of that on a little bit more real-time basis. So that's why we have Chris here, who is going to give us that portion of the report. So, Chris, take it away.
Thank you. So I broke it down into, for special education, into 3 different categories. The first being salaries and benefits, second contracted services, and last being supplies and equipment. So it's not included in the packets. So I know some of you are looking.
Right, it's not, just so you know, I mean, this is, you know, all this stuff is the financial report that we have to have every month that sort of goes through and then ends up with a, something that gets approved, you know, at our monthly board meeting. What Chris is doing is extra. I mean, maybe if, you know, he's just going to he's just going to say a few things. If at some point in the future we think that maybe a piece of paper or something.
Can you start over then? 'Cause
Sure.
I wasn't listening, I
That's
was looking for the packet, so.
No problem.
Yeah, this is our first time doing this portion of the report, so bear with us as we sort of feel out the.
Presentation.
So,
Okay.
is this, would it be included in this,
Yeah, it's
these
on page,
pages?
it's on page 15.
Okay, thank
So
you.
1200 is what Chris is going to be talking about
Right.
in a narrative way. But those numbers are what's represented every month in the financial report. It's a couple different places. It's also in the statement that Beth just reviewed on page 6 in summary form, and the details on page 15. So
Thank you.
she talked about on page 6.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so I broke this down into 3 categories that would seem to make the most sense. The first being salary and benefits, the second category being contracted services, and the last category being supplies and equipment. Okay. So under salary and benefits, that encompasses special education Tredyffrin-Easttown employees. So special education teachers, speech therapists, and paraeducators that are still TE employees. Okay. So for that category, we're currently staffed slightly under the budgeted FTEs by 1.0 teacher FTE for this current school year. And based on our current enrollment, and we do not have a need to increase professional staffing during this school year, but we're going to continue to monitor that enrollment. Okay. The second category of contracted services, so that encompasses 3 main areas. All right, it also encompasses staffing, tuition, and extended school year. So when I say staffing, I'm talking about the other paraeducators, aides, behavior specialists, school psychologists, OT and PT, those sorts of services. So under staffing, right now we're staffed to meet our student needs and we're monitoring that. It's a little early to project, though our contracted nursing support services to support students is trending slightly higher than anticipated. So the second category now is tuition. So this encompasses students who are placed out of district on their IEP team, but also students who are under an educational service agreement. So tuition, again, it's also a little bit early to project. Currently, we're in line with our projections, but this is one of the more volatile areas where we see students going out of district mid-year. Students who are adjudicated, for example, get placed in adjudicated settings without any of our control, and we're obligated to pay for their educational program. So that's something we're going to monitor very closely throughout the school year. The last piece under contracted services is for extended school year. That occurs during the summer. So this is the summer of 2019, so July 2019 onward. So while not all of our bills have been received for the summer services, we anticipate to come in at our budgeted amounts for extended school year. The last big category is supplies and equipment. And so this is the smallest of these three buckets, and it encompasses teaching materials, curriculum, technology, and office supplies and things like that. So it's a little early to tell, but we have purchased updated curriculum materials and other items that were a little bit more costly than we anticipated. So we're going to continue to monitor this as our curriculum needs move throughout the school year.
Thanks, Chris. So in the aggregate, you would say that we're essentially on track, maybe even with the one FTE, maybe a little bit under
Yes.
at this point, but still, some things are a little bit over at this point, but
Yes.
the FTE makes a big difference in
Yes.
that regard. Okay. All right. Any questions from the committee for Chris? If you're itching to hit the button.
Not so much on the category, but thank you for the breakout, I appreciate that. Can you just refresh my memory, has the IU gone to electronic invoicing? Versus paper invoicing?
No, we have paper.
It's still paper.
Yes.
Have they given any kind of commitment as to when they might go electronic as a backup to the paper?
Moving on, I don't know. I don't have any information.
Okay.
We have an electronic approval process for the services, but that's the extent of it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any questions from the committee for Chris? No? All right. Scott, ready? Nope. Any questions from the public? Okay. Thanks, Chris. All right. That concludes our, gets us to number 2. Now we're going to be talking a little bit about capital funding, which is going to encompass, I think, a few things at this point. So I'll let you tee this up, and we can go from there.
All right. Prior to talking about what's in the packet, which is the capital source of use and things like that, this is related, but we're in the midst of closing out 18-19's fiscal year in the audit, and closing the books preliminarily. We went over that contribution to fund balance that we can make. It's probably in the around, I'm going to say the area of about $4 million that we're going to be able to contribute to fund balance at the end of fiscal year 18-19. So as a result of that, we're coming in tonight to talk about the transfer of the capital fund. It's been budgeted at $1.2 million in the budget. It's already part of the authorized spending for that year. So what we've done in the past couple of years is bring those transfers to you as finance committee to review those preliminarily. We have to get it into the audit report in 18-19, so we have to move on that in a small window of time to make that transfer so it shows up in the 18-19 financial statements that we're going to present next month. So we've already told the auditors we're coming to you tonight. As long as there's no objection from the majority of the board, we're going to move ahead with that transfer and then inform the we're ready to go with the entries and actually making it happen. But we want to talk about it preliminary here in finance, so you have a chance to weigh in. So naturally, you're thinking, well, we have $4 million to contribute to fund balance. What's the reason for that, or what's behind that? So initially, when we looked at the breakdowns, the majority of the contribution to fund balance is coming from a lower spending projection than we anticipated. And then one revenue item that we did talk about a lot during the year, which was earning on investments. Even though we projected we were going to have a lot more earnings, I think we were talking about projecting over $1 million or close to $1 million more, I think 900,000, and ended up being even larger than that. So that was significant increase over the budgeted amount, about 1.6 million over what we budgeted in investment earnings. And we talked about that when we did the budget for 1920. The fact that we had a much higher number in the budget this year than we had last year, and should we make it higher? And we said at that point that interest rates are flattening or starting to actually go down. That's what we've been experiencing. So on the revenue side, that's really the only anomaly. We'll get into more specifics of all the breakdowns of these things when we do the presentation in November of the audit, because that's when we get into the analysis of variances on individual departments and where that comes from. So right now I'm going to give you the overview based on a major object level. I'm not going to get into functions necessarily or individual departments. Other than that, earnings on investments on the revenue side, there really isn't much other netting of revenue other than the state revenue. So we got more subsidy than we anticipated. Typically, when we do our state budget, we don't necessarily believe the governor's budget. We look to PDE to give us a recommendation on what our subsidies are going to be, and that's what we build into the budget. Because of the timing of our budget, we're usually approving ours before the state is approving theirs. So as a result of that, we did get some additional money in basic ed and special ed funding. In addition, we had grant, we had more in transportation subsidy we anticipated. And we also filed for contingency money in special ed that we don't budget because we never know if we're going to get it. But we did get that, so that's all contributed to more state revenue than anticipated, about $500,000. So that's on the revenue side. On the expense side, we did what we tried to do during the year, which was cut back on spending, reduce our spending, not come in with a deficit. We were successful in that, doing that in a lot of different departments, but mostly in supplies and equipment, to the tune of about $1.6 million under where we thought we'd be. And then in repairs and maintenance, we were under significantly. That's the second largest budget, non-instructional budget, operation maintenance plan, so we're under that pretty significantly as well. And then special ed, student services had lower in the 500 area, which is other purchase services. And again, we'll drill down more on that later next month when we do the variance analysis. But they had overall in that district-wide, we had about $760,000 left. So if you add all those up, it gets to about $4 million. So the $1.2 million would be taken out of that number and then transferred to the capital. So the net contribution to fund balance would be somewhere around $4 million minus the 1.2. So 2.83 million revenue in that range after the contribution. So that's all I have in that piece before we get to the issue.
Okay. No, why don't we sort of...
Okay.
So, okay, so to summarize, I mean, we are sort of talking a little bit about two different issues, although they can be related in the sense that we have the ability, even regardless of the contribution to fund balance that we're going to be making. We have under our budget, the last time we went around with this, we budgeted in terms of our authorized spend, and this went below the line, so it wasn't incorporated into the budget in terms of figuring out the tax rate. But we did authorize a spend that contemplated transferring $1.2 million to the capital fund. And we talked about that as being sort of best practice in general because that allows us to put more cash into the capital fund and then ultimately need to borrow less in that context. So that is something that we could do, given that we have authorized spend, regardless of what we ended up with in the books and whether we can make a contribution to fund balance or not. Fortunately, we can make that contribution without having to dip into fund balance based upon the performance of the 18-19 year. And so what we've got is we've got now a potential, what was an aggregate amount of about $4 million contribution to fund balance. So fortunately, we'll be able to increase our, we'll be able to make that capital contribution and still increase our fund balance by $2.8 million as opposed to decreasing it by anywhere between $1.5 and $2 million, which is what was on tap, I believe, in the budget. I think it was 1.5.
Right. Yes.
What we had approved in the budget was a budget gap there of 1.5 million. So things turned out better than we had hoped. Sounds like a little bit from the revenue side and also from the expense side. The folks in the administration got the message and did what they wanted, did what they needed to do to try to reduce expenses in that regard. So the larger sum, it's all a good message for the district from the financial standpoint. So I guess in terms of what Art is looking from us at this point is to make sure that nobody has any real objections to moving the money over to the capital fund. We don't technically have to authorize that again because we've already authorized it when we approved the budget. Actually, we authorized that as part of our budget. So, with that intro, I turn it over to questions or comments from the committee.
Yes, I have two.
So my first question is, so it was, I want to address the idea that we passed the budget with a $1.5 million gap, and then we show up with a $4 million surplus at the end of that year, and it sounds like $1.6 million comes from income investment. $1.6 million came from money we didn't spend. We got a little bit more in subsidy to the tune of something like, you said, $700,000, $500,000.
Yeah.
And then maintenance and all of that. Can we do, I don't know if is there any, because that's like $5.5 million by the time you do the 4 above and 1.5 under, $5.5 million. That's different from what we sort of thought going into that year, and that seems significant. So I guess the first part is that seems significant, and I understand your answers, and I understand how all the math works. It doesn't seems a little big. That $5.5 million seems like a big swing. So that's the first thing, and I don't know what my point is exactly, other than it's large, and I don't know what my question is exactly, other than can we figure that out better? And I guess the answer is probably going to be no. We're already doing as best as we can, but that's sort of my first comment question. And then the second thing is, does it make sense? Why do we need to talk about the transfer pre-audited numbers? Like they can't audit the numbers until we transfer the money? Is that right?
You have to represent the transfer in 18-19, which means it has to be in the financial statements and it has to be reported as part of your statements. So the audited financial statements, so it has to be represented in the document that we're going to present in November. It can't be done in 19-20. It'll be part of 18-19-20.
So just out of curiosity, so it sounds like that's our only, are there any other options if we don't want to transfer it to capital? Can we put all of that $4 million into fund balance and then next year transfer it to capital? If we chose to.
The board approved a budget that has a transfer this current year that we're in right now of $1.2 million.
Okay.
So if you wanted to transfer $2.4 million in 19-20, you'd have to have the ability within the authorized spending to do that, which means you have to save enough spending a year from now. You won't know until a year from now whether you can do that. You won't even know a year from now whether you can even do it 1.2, because you don't know if you have the money to actually move, because you may be up against your authorized spending. So the 18-19 decision is there.
That's it.
Michelle? Go ahead.
So in the past though, haven't we, we've transferred, we've kept money in the fund balance and then transferred it out. Can you explain a little bit for everybody to understand how this is different? Like, why wouldn't we keep it in the fund balance and close the books and then say, we're gonna build it into the budget for next year, or we're gonna do a.
So the year that you're just talking about is the year we moved 10 million. That's the only time we ever moved
Yeah.
outside of what we're talking about now. And that year, we actually moved the $10 million in the budget. And then moved it. So you can't do that unless you have it in your authorized spending. So the only amount we have included in authorized spending in 18-19 is 1.2. Now, we could do a calculation if we want to move more than 1.2 to figure out how much more room we have with an authorized spending. We could move more than that if we'd like. But you can't move, you can't exceed your authorized spending. So the year we're in right now, we're 1.2 move. So you won't know for until a year from now, we're having the same discussion next year, whether we have the ability to move any of that money, more or less, at this point. So the next budget year you can affect will be 2021. So if you want to move money 2 budget years from now, we'll discuss it. You have to put it in authorized spending.
That was purposeful, right? Because we had gone for years without a capital transfer to the capital fund. And we tried to keep a ratio of 75% borrowed to 25% contributions from the fund balance. And when we developed the budget that created that $1.22 million, we said we should annually, right, as a group, make a dedicated contribution to fund balance. We had a discussion whether it should be above the line or below the line. Ideally, we'd always have it above the line, but given the other potential drivers to the deficit, we decided to put it below the line. And then we carried that same philosophy into the current year's budget. So we are enacting something that this committee had directed us to do.
I guess as a follow-up question then is how close are we then with this bumper crop, so to speak? How close are we then to that ratio again, if we would have to draw down on some of our reserves?
Well, it depends on the amount you're borrowing, right? So one of the assumptions was at 1.2, if you did that over 5 years, that was 6 million. And then if you were borrowing 18 million for the 6 million, you'd have your 3-to-1 ratio. You should weigh in if I'm saying something that's not quite accurate, but if we're borrowing more money.
Close, the logic applies.
Right, if we're borrowing more money, then the amount that you need to contribute to remain in a quarter would be greater, and if you don't need to borrow as much, then it would be less. But it was based on that roughly, over 5 years, you'd get 6 million, and then if you needed 24, that'd be another.
Right. We were biting it off. We were biting off 5-year chunks of funding. And at that point, the 5-year roll, we needed a transition here. So in between the borrowing, so as you're spending down, you wanted to have cash reserves to get you to the next funding. That's when we were on a 5-year cycle. That was before the law changed. But still, the logic applies of funding some of what you're doing in the capital fund with reserves.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Do you have a sense, I know we don't have our audited numbers yet, but do you have a sense of how far away we are when we transfer this from our authorized spending amount, like what the gap is?
Between what the expenses were and what we budgeted.
Yeah, and I may not be asking the question exactly right.
It's like 8 million. Sorry.
Because the authorized spend included not just the capital transfer, but also other contingencies, right?
Oh, yeah, we had 2.5 million, yeah. Yeah, it's a budget, that's everything, including contingency, that's our authorized. Athletics, all that stuff. Yeah, but we budgeted the contingency amount, which was last year, last fiscal year, 2.5 million, which we don't anticipate being spent. But it is an authorized spend. We did that in March.
I think so. Thank you.
Any questions from this side of the aisle? Go ahead, Ed.
Okay, so this is 2018, 2019. Right. And we thought we were going to have the $1.5 million deficit, and we turned into the black $4 million, at the end of the day. It is, and we're going to take, we were going to commit to put the 1.2 million of that into capital fund. And so the remaining 2.8, where is that going to just stay in the general fund?
Right, yes.
And we can't put it into capital fund because it's not within our authorized.
No, you could move more than 1.2 and still stay within your authorized spend.
Okay, did we go up all the way to the 2.8?
Sure.
No. So what are our options with this, the money with the 2.8? We can keep it in the general fund, we can put it into capital. Is there any other options?
You can recommit it. We're going to show you commitments of fund balance at the end of the year based on what we've done in the past. You could commit it to some other commitment if you'd like. We're always going to recommit fund balance.
Okay, well,
You could transfer, as long as you're within the authorized spending, you can always transfer money to capital fund. It's just that you don't really know that until the end of the fiscal year, so we never really know it until now, based on the previous year, with any kind of real confidence.
Okay. And what's under discussion tonight as far as what we're going to do with the money, or is that a decision that's going to be made later on after thinking about it?
So what we would do, as long as there's not a majority objection by the board, is we would move 1.2 million, because that's what was authorized to do with the budget. We move it to capital, and then whatever the contribution is to fund balance in the audit financial statements, we would bring you a commitment of fund balance, and then you could move that around any way you want within the general fund. But there has to be something in the audit also showing what the fund balance is, so it has to be calculated based on what the contribution is. So that'll be represented in the financial statements that we present next week.
Okay, I guess my, observation is it's 2.8, that this is a huge swing, just like Kate was mentioning. And basically, if we had, a sense of, in the, April, May, and June of that year, when we were looking at this budget, that we were going to have such a swing, we might have given taxpayers a little bit more of a break, where we might have set our fund balance, or capital balance higher, you know what I mean? So it would just not be 1.2, it would be something a little bit higher, but basically I'm thinking that we need to have a little bit more accuracy as, as a tool to help the board understand, how to make these difficult decisions.
When did we know about the swing at this point?
The one for 18, that I just presented.
Yeah.
Well, until we go through the audited numbers and we look at everything, and part of what our process is, and we discuss this kind of internally all the time, but we encumber documents because we anticipate there's going to be an expenditure. And that encumbrance technically is represented as an expenditure until it's no longer known to be something that's coming. So when encumbrances get released at the end of the year as part of our process, that's when a lot of the knowledge of, hey, we're not going to get this is gonna happen, or we didn't think we were gonna, we thought we were gonna spend it, we didn't. And then sometimes it's just like, when you told us to cut back, we did, we're not gonna spend this money. So it's part of the process, so a lot of it opens up during the audit process. So over the summer, we'll report to folks, that's what we learn these things. Unless we, unless somebody telegraphs it to us ahead of time, that's what gives us that information.
Sean?
So, could I just explain, I just put on a point here. We know the authorized, that we have under the line in contingency 1.2. We know that there's more. What keeps us from transferring more at this time and having that stated in the audit? What would keep us from transferring more?
Nothing, I said you could transfer up to your authorized spending.
And wouldn't that help us then, because we have a big project on the horizon? No, it's, no, I'm not because of facilities. Full disclosure, chair of facilities, capital, that comes my way, is always nice. But we do know what we budgeted for the expansion project. And we've heard from some people in our community that part of money that we lose is when we finance, right? So we lose money in financing fees, and if we're able to do the transfer now, because we had a good year, interest rates were good on our investments, why wouldn't we do that now? Put it towards the capital, knowing that we authorized a couple of things that are on the horizon here, that were big ticket items, air conditioning in elementary schools, expansion of the high school. And we would borrow less money at that point, and we would be paying the interest, as much interest on the money we borrow.
I'm not saying what you're saying makes sense, it's just that the board only approved to transfer 1.2 million, so if I was doing it different than that, it would be board approved, not that you couldn't all agree, you wouldn't be voting on it. It's not voting on a public meeting, you can directly do that, as long as you have a majority that agrees with that, what you do, so do it outside of what we approved in the budget.
So what's the process for that? Would that have to be a committee first, and then in the October board meeting?
If everybody here tonight said do it,
There's no, so there's, I want to make sure of this before I say another word. There is no downside financially to transferring the money into the capital fund. From what you can tell based on where we're at with the audit and,
well, the downside is you can't move it back,
well, I know you can't move it back, right.
so that's the downside. Just some.
But we've talked about this at both finance and facilities, that when you look at this capital sources and uses on page 47, at some point we're kind of like running out of money, right? So now we have what appears to be a good year because of the interest rates and some, good departmental cutting and looking at things, something that we really pushed for. I want to make, I'm obviously I'm cautious because I know you can't put it back, but this is not a year where we don't have a big project on schedule, right? So it might make more sense because we do know that at some point the ground is going to be, dug up and we're going to be adding on to the high school, and that is coming. It's not 2 years ago when we were sure we were going to be adding on to the high school.
We already said we need to be looking at means of borrowing the money to pay for the projects that are in our infrastructure report, which include that expansion.
Yeah, it's clear we need to acquire from that.
So that would change potentially the calculus. Sure.
Absolutely.
I'm
I'm
sure
trying to
that,
dissuade you at all, just let it go.
okay, I just wanted to make sure, like, I am
That's the reason
fiscally
we didn't bring it
cautious
to you.
about things, but.
We didn't bring that to you because it hadn't been previously okayed by the board.
I'd rather keep the carry for other order of questions in the public before I say something definitive about this.
Okay, well, that's fine, but I just want to make sure I understand sort of what you're considering, is what people are thinking about this in the right way, that there's a potential to actually transfer more to the capital fund, which has the potential to save us in debt service costs. And you have that within the authorized spend. So what you're asking folks at least to consider at this point is this idea of saying, well, we only authorize 1.2 as a line item in the authorized spend. We've got more authorized spend in the unfortunate circumstance of having a bit more revenue than expenditures. So let's think about whether we want to push that to the capital fund and perhaps save some borrowing costs, knowing that we're going to need that money to pay for the projects that we've got on that project.
Very well said, thank you. Yes, I think it's important that, you know, we've heard a lot of discussion around the cost of borrowing money. And if we can lower that cost, that seems to make sense to me. Because we do have a big project in the immediate future, not 5 years down the road. It's here, we're going through the township for approval processes, and once all of that is done completely, we know we're going to be breaking ground. So this isn't like move it now because we think we're going to build something. We're going to build something. And I think it's important that we get the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak, and have some of our money towards that interest rate. That's what I've heard from the public, so, but I still want to hear more questions and comments in that area.
All right, sounds good. Mary Garrett, did you have something?
So I want to make sure that I understand how much more money are we talking about that we could authorize to move to the capital fund? On top of the 1.2 million.
You could go up, well, you could go up to your authorized spending amount. So our current projection has 7.4 million. It's still in your authorized spending amount. So I would never recommend 7.4 million.
You'd be drawing down existing reserves to reach the authorized spend.
Yeah, you'd have to take over and above. So you take if we're saying there's 4 million of contribution to fund balance, and you only want to move contributions that were made in the 18-19 year, that would be 4 million. But if you wanted to move other fund balance funds that were already there from prior years, then that would be an additional 3 million. That makes sense.
And in our budget for this current school year, we budgeted thinking that we were gonna have to pull $2 million out of our fund reserves. Is that correct? 1.5, okay, thank you.
But that's not a function of authorized spending, that's a function of revenue and expense.
Right.
So Art,
Go ahead.
so it's really, we could take the full $2.8 million, but to really make Michelle happy, we could give an additional 3, you know what I mean, up to even more right now that if we took it out of the general fund.
Just be clear.
Make the taxpayers happy.
Just be clear, it would be 4 million. Well, altogether, right? Because it's 1.2 plus the 2.8.
Right,
So it's 4, so it'd be 4 million.
4, and then we can take an additional amount out of the general fund if we want.
If we wanted to draw down on the
But no
reserves,
more than 7 million.
but no more than 7 million.
Okay,
Correct.
got it.
Okay. Kate?
So the $1.2 million is all we need to talk about. Like, we need to talk about that money moving capital tonight. This over and above $1.2 million is part of the investment strategy, or the funding strategy for the projects we have. That's something we could look at, and like, we're gonna have to look at how we're going to fund those projects. Could we look at, we don't have to move more than 1.2 million, and we could look at putting, we could move from the general fund at a time in the future as part of a whole funding strategy, right?
We could, but we couldn't do that technically until,
This time next year.
well, not even this time next year, 2 years from now. Because we've already set the budget for we've already set our budget for next year, right? we're in that year right now. And so, at some point, we'll do all these things that we're doing now, at this same time next year, and we're gonna say, okay, how do we turn out? And how do we turn out against our authorized spending? If we happen to have authorized spend to the tune of an extra $2.8 million, yeah, we could do that. There is a slight risk that we might not, and that we wouldn't be able to do that. Right now, we basically have the means and the opportunity to move it, to move up to $4 million. We don't know whether we're gonna have that at this same time next year. We may have the means because, in the sense that we'll have, I don't know which is which, but anyway, we may have the money sitting there, but we might not have the ability to do it depending upon how the financial statements come out at the end of the year. So if we're not going to do it now, and when I say now, I mean we're talking about it now in finance, but I imagine we can, we've got another meeting coming up. We've got another board meeting coming up, right, in October. And so stuff is going to get closed out. I don't know, you tell me, you're frowning now. I've now screwed everything up. So this is the part of the meeting where Art turns to me and like jabs me and says, Todd, why did you say that?
No, you're right, we have another board meeting, but they're getting to the point where they can start drafting the financials, so we want to tell them what we think's going to happen and how that gets represented in the financial statements. So we have done the draft that we reviewed before we bring it to the finance committee. So I don't know the exact day, but they're going to come out again, do some more field work. So I know they're not totally bumped up yet, so I don't want to say it's not possible to do that. But to your point, the amount of money that we move anytime after now, if it's not in the 18-19 year, would then be last year's money. Be moving within an authorized spending the following year. Because once it gets contributed to fund balance, then it's just a reserve amount. It's not excess that you're generating in that year. In the last 3 years, we haven't had the opportunity within the authorized spending to do anything like this. In fact, the last time we came to you, we only had $650,000 because we didn't have enough room in the authorized spending. So this is unusual that you have that much left in the authorized spending. Because the excess really doesn't have anything to do with the revenue side of it. I mean, what you're talking about doesn't have anything to do with the revenue side. You're talking about how much you can get of that with that authorized spending. But the only piece that's really attributable to 18-19 is that $4 million. Like to Rich's point, everything above that is prior year reserves.
Anyway, Roberta.
So if we transfer a greater amount, does that increase or change significantly our outlook for our investment income next year? So we're balancing, how would you just comment on that? Because I know you said as our fund balance has been depleted, that our outlook for the investment income goes down.
So, without knowing exactly how it would affect it, it's the same amount of money, it's just in two different places. And depending on how we spend it, we're going to have a significant decrease soon within that timeline of the project. So there's going to be a large commitment of money that's going to be outflowing. So that's mostly going to impact next budget year when we do our projections for interest rates. So the amount of money we're talking about is not significant enough to make a big impact. The spending will make a bigger impact than this.
And so for this year, I think, we've been watching the investment income go up, and we've adjusted it up over every year. Does it seem like this year we're going the same, continue to keep going in that direction?
Yeah, I mentioned a little earlier that it's starting to flatten out. And we had talked about it really trending down, so there's a couple clicks down in some of the bigger ones, but we've had some long, we've ladder everything, so we're still riding some of that higher number, but as we start to ladder that out, clicks over, it'll be down a couple notches. But I still think it'll be up over the average when we do our analysis for, or something for those earnings, so it's still going to be higher than that.
And for the money that we did not spend next year with their fewer doctors? They could comment on how much of that is, just deferred for another year, or is that, it's not?
November is when we're gonna do the variance, and be able, because then we'll have, the auditors will have finished, with each line, and then we'll be able to do some analysis of, what the variance is and what produced that, but also, and when we have that breakdown, what might be one-time savings that we had last year versus something that was, maybe a savings that we'll always have. There's a lot of one-time savings, it's hard to know.
Sure.
You know,
Absolutely. I mean, I can think of one that I know of right now, because we had a discussion about put off buying a truck. Maintenance, which was like $145,000, we just pushed it to the next year. But that was because we were trying to come back. But we already bought it this year, so. We just waited until July and August to do it.
Any comments from public? Stacy?
I just had a question. I remember there was something also about the phone system. I can't remember what the amount was, but does that include facilities like the CCTV was, or is that something different? Because that would just be another thing to consider about switching money over to capital fund.
That would be a project that's in the capital fund that we discussed at facilities, so wouldn't have anything to do with the 18-19
No, I know.
spending or any of that, but it would be paid for by what we're talking about, moving it over to that fund.
That's what I'm saying, and that was unanticipated, so here's another, it's just another argument in favor of moving more money than you budgeted at this project. That was just my guess. I'm not a financial person, so I look to you guys for advice, but,
Thanks. Jamie?
What was the $500,000 from for special ed?
Specifically, I don't have what exactly what it is, but it was in the 500 area, which is typically tuition.
So, but you said it came from the state?
No, that was on the revenue side, 500 on the expenditure side, I also mentioned, but we had revenue amounts.
we have to break that down in November.
Yeah, subsidy amounts, I had said earlier.
right.
The amount that we get from the state, from the governor's budget, we don't put those amounts in, we look at what PE says is all hold harmless from the previous year, and that's what we budget. So if they increase our funding in the final legislative action, when they pass their budget after we pass ours,
Right.
we don't have that budget. So we had some additional subsidy revenue from special ed, basic ed, and transportation. And then we also file for contingency monies. Chris files for it every year, but we never know if we're gonna get it, so we don't budget it.
So the 500 was the contingency.
No, that's only
November.
175.
We'll have to break that down in November.
So you'll break it down in November, so you can see where it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I did say that.
Thank you. Can you guys put it on a, it's much easier for us to follow if it's in the agenda or on the screen.
Yeah, every year when we present the audit, we do a detailed variance analysis by function and by department. And it's in the packet. Yeah, it's in the packet.
It'll be in the packet in the material.
Next month.
Just, where are attorney's fees allocated, especially for special ed? And then that's up
Under
question.
legal services.
So it's not under individual services,
Well, it's,
under administrative.
so it's budgeted where you have to, PD will tell you where you need to budget legal expenses and they're all under legal services.
But regardless of what the legal service was for the school district, because you could have a legal service for
You can.
a lot of different things.
Yes, you can, it's all budgeted in that department.
So it's one thing not allocated.
Yeah, it's not allocated in the 2028 budget. It is part of the special ed analysis that we've done. It's not part of student services cost center. So in other words, there's a lot of things that are special ed that aren't budgeted in student services, like transportation. So we, plus special ed students, that's budgeted under transportation. So the only place that really gets summed up is in the Act 16 report or in the exception calculation for special ed.
So when that calculator. And is that somewhere we can see it?
It'll be calculated when the state releases that form in December,
And
December,
you guys can
January.
public on our internet.
We don't usually put the exception calculation in, but we're gonna talk about it this year, whether we're eligible, so if we do, we can present that.
Neil, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry I was a little late, trying to get my paddle game together for the winter, it's not working, but, remember how outraged you were last May when you had a deficit and it was dropped on you that there's another $500,000 in special education spending that'll increase that deficit? Remember how upset you were? $4 million, 10 weeks after the year's done, we find $4 million. Not an insignificant sum. Mr. Sweeney asked the right question. If we had known the truth then, would we have looked at the tax increase the same way? Excellent question. I want good government. You want to dispense it. You need the right numbers to dispense good government. I'll talk a little bit in a minute about what to do with your surplus, but let's look it back. 7 out of the last 8 years. It's the November miracle. It's the budgeted deficit that becomes surplus, profit. It's profit. You took in more money than you spent on education, even though your budget said it went the other way, and your projection said it would go the other way. It's okay. It's habitual, and you should know it as soon as it occurs, not after the fact, if you're to dispense good government, which we all want. It's a big enterprise. $155 million in expenses. 124 of that, $124 million comes from these local communities. It affects us all. It affects us all. And when you're looking at a structural deficit, because I was going to talk to you tonight about structural deficit and what that meant and how you have to get a control over what the things are that create those things, which are different than one-time deficits. Now we have profit, surplus. You didn't know about it. You should have. You were outraged when your deficit went up by $500,000. Your deficit was erased tonight. 10 weeks ago. Right? This happened last year. Now we have another profit. It's a September miracle in Tredyffrin-Easttown. Okay, fine. It happens habitually. You should go back and check. What do you do with it? Listen, you're coming up on a big project, so the whole transfer thing and all, you do have to wash it through a budget. It has to be, to move fund balance, it's got to be profit. It's got to show up as profit in any given year so that you can move it over. You're going to do a big project. There's nothing wrong, particularly with the $1.2 million that you'd already anticipated to fund into that fund. Now be careful. This is part of the Lower Merion lawsuit, who ran big profits and were hiding them in funds. That's part of what they got caught doing. You have a big project, you're not burying it. It doesn't bring down your cost of borrowing. It may help you borrow less in the future, okay? The money you borrowed in February, we wish we could borrow today when it's 100 basis points or 1% cheaper. It's a shame because we're getting whipsawed on that. You have negative arbitrage. You borrowed $30 million, it's still in the bank today, but short-term rates have gone down. So the difference between what you earn and what you pay is increasing because what you earn is less. But you're sitting on a boatload of cash, $137 million today. Now some of that's bond proceeds, some of that's early tax receipts and all. You're always heavy this time of year. You don't have a cash problem. But to use some of this surplus profit to decrease future borrowing, that's fine. If you just put it in the capital fund and invent another project, well then we're in the same place, right? We didn't do anything. But you should be upset. I would be upset. Let me be upset for you. You're my representative. You need to know on a current basis the best estimates of what's going to happen, even in the future. You haven't been here that long, right? Your administration has, right? You're counting on them. You're counting on you to give me these numbers. And when I'm sitting there kvetching over 6, 5, 4, 3.91 tax increase is going to affect my neighbors, I need to know what it looks like. Don't tell me I've got a structural deficit and then 10 weeks later find $4 million, right? Some of it on the revenue side, some of it on the special ed side, which erased the $500,000 you're given that night. So it's important, you know, it's important for you to get real-time information. Everything you heard tonight is correct about authorized spending, things like that, from things I've learned over the years. So if you, certainly the 1.2 million that you'd already planned to put it, you know, to contribute to the capital fund, that's fine. If you want to do an additional amount of profit to put into your capital fund because you're going to spend it, also fine. But follow through on it. Say, okay, then it's going into the project we're going to borrow for, and we're going to borrow less, right? And now we have savings. So, you know, link all your thoughts together. But as you move forward, you know, you're going to need some real-time information. Even now, I mean, things jump out in the financial statements now, right? We have a lot of transfers going on in Tredyffrin, big time. You know, that's going to be over budget. You're going to have a pretty good revenue year, right? You've already collected more tax base than you did at this time last year. Tax, you know, the assessment base is going up. This is going to be a good revenue year. Does that mean we're shooting for another profit? No. I don't think, right? I don't think so. But remember, 7 out of the last 8 years, this is the miracle that happens in Tredyffrin. That the deficit you were kvetching over and trying to plug a hole and trying to look at next year and raising taxes turns into surplus at audit time. So, you know, a little history. But you should be concerned. I am.
Thanks, Neil. Can you state your name, just to make sure?
Jeff Value. I'm Michelle.
Good to see you.
You know, to a large extent, I hear what the gentleman was saying, your discussion beforehand, the superintendent's comment about doing your deviation analysis from at the end of the year. I guess my question is, do you look at that year to year to year to year to year and not get down into all these little numbers here? It just is a bottom line number. And that's what I budgeted. Do I hit that? Am I above it? Am I below it? And what are the reasons for it? Maybe you had a high transfer tax. You got some extra money. You didn't get as much in transfer taxes as you anticipated. Your special ed costs went up because we brought more kids into the school who had those needs. All those kinds of things. I spent 40 years in business. The last 10 putting capital budgets that exceeded you guys are talking about. But I always looked at the numbers year to year to year. And I did things a little bit differently. I said, this is where we spent. Went up 2-3% over this year. And for the next year, that's the number we can't exceed. And your first go around is to back into that number. I don't know how you do your budget, but at least it looks to me like we need to do that variance analysis from year to year to year and see if you can address what the issues are. You guys got a very tough problem because you got people move and kids come in and kids go out and all the rest of it. But the community is very, very concerned about the amount of money we give to the school district every single year. If you go down to Tredyffrin Township, my God, what you hear down there is we never increase taxes. We never increase taxes. They're always the same. I don't know what Easttown does. But I can tell you one thing. We have consistently, year after year after year, had to increase the amount of money that we pay and that we all pay into our tax fund. And I think the message that I would have is really take a close, hard look at what you're doing with that money. You know, there are people out there whispering that you have $200 million in a sock somewhere. And we know that's not true, hopefully. But, Matt, yours?
Not mine.
See, I don't wear socks, I don't have that problem. Yeah, but, you know, that stuff kind of germinates over time, and then people really, really get annoyed. And maybe it's warranted, maybe it isn't, I don't know. But my shade of it.
Thanks, Bill. Art, can you talk a little bit about sort of, you know, just very briefly, the sort of the variance analysis? And I know we sort of look at previous years and sort of how the variance compares.
Yeah, and we've presented a variance analysis every year as part of our discussion of the audit and analyzing the expenses. And part of what we look at when we do budgeting is the previous amount that was budgeted and whether your actual was close to that. But in our assumptions of building the budget, we use actual. So, and that's how we build our assumptions on the revenue side. The expenditure side is a little bit different than private in that, you know, we build our budget based on the expenses, and then we try to figure out how the revenue fits into that. Typically, it's in business, it's revenue improves, and that makes sure we don't spend more than that. So it's a little bit different, but yeah, we use that as part of our assumptions on the revenue and expenditure side. Most of it's driven by kids. You know, 70-some% of our budget is staffing. So there isn't a large part of our budget that's discretionary. But, you know, to that point, the amounts that are left that weren't spent are mostly discretionary.
And then Neil talked about the surpluses that we have 7 out of the last 8 years. Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of sort of what surplus versus not surplus? 'Cause I know that in some of those years, we didn't move any money to capital, and that sort of helped with that.
Yeah, there were a couple of years that we had very small, we were in the black by a very small amount. And, even after we had $750,000, I think, left in 1 year, 450 in 1 year. 1 year we did spend fund balance, but we didn't move money to the capital, so we had negative. We took money out of fund balance to balance the year. So there really hasn't been a significant swing like this in a number of years. And, you know, we can look at those going forward. But each year that you budget is a finite year. It's based on how many kids come, what the staffing is. So you can look at 5 years ago, but the kids weren't here, so it's totally different. We weren't retracting the way we were back in 2011 and 12 and 13 when we were in retraction mode, and we were specifically cutting things that were producing savings that we weren't, you know, we were injecting a certain amount of the budget of that savings, but we couldn't anticipate what that would generate. In those years, it was much more difficult to predict where we were going to end up because of those strategies.
Thanks. Any other comments?
Are we going to move off this chart?
Eventually. Not quite yet.
Okay.
So I guess that brings it back to us. Michelle, have your thoughts crystallized anymore?
So I'm very comfortable with the 1.2. I think that, given that we do have big projects that are already in the chute, that we should give serious consideration to the 4 million, so that our cost of borrowing are less. You know, I would not recommend that if it was just a year that we didn't have big projects like the high school expansion or air conditioning for the elementary schools. But I think it's probably warranted at this time. If people have a different feeling about the number, I mean, at least what Art said, it's not the full amount. I'm willing to hear other board members' comments about that. I'm not stuck on a number. So if there's further discussion that people want to have, given that, I'd be interested in those comments from the board members.
Michelle's initial point was that we would save money on interest, right? And then
We wouldn't have to borrow as much.
And then that was another point that we heard, so I think I just wanna understand it better before we commit more than one, before I commit more than 1.2, but I'm just 1%, so, and I know it's 5.
Mary Eric, did you have anything to add?
I mean, obviously, I'm comfortable with the 1.2, and you all already authorized that. And I kind of feel like Kate does, in that I am I'm in general in support for the high school expansion and the air conditioning in the elementary schools to move more. I just don't know enough to say how much that is. So it's not that I don't think that's wise, I just don't feel like, I need more information to feel like I'm making the best choice that I can make.
Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, question for Art, I guess, is that, well, first statement, one, I'm okay, again, moving that, as I guess the majority of you are, moving that portion over 1.2. My question would be, if we decide, and I'm not there yet, but if we decided to move the other portion of that money over, would we have to do that by our October meeting, board meeting?
October board meeting, I
Yeah.
think would still be okay if we did that.
If we decided to do that, that would still be under the guideline, okay. I'm
Checked a
just,
couple times,
I'm
but
just
yeah.
trying to get a date, that deadline, if we did decide, that would be,
Yeah,
because I'm not ready to make that move tonight, but as we move forward and maybe get some more information or questions, it may be a thought process as we deliberate in maybe in our October meeting, but at this point, I'm not ready to go there at this point. But
Yeah,
that's,
we make a motion at the board meeting to move an additional X.
right, okay.
And if the board would approve that, then we can get to it.
Because I think Michelle's idea certainly has credence as we move on these big projects. As Stone mentioned, the phones and other things, there's always things moving in the facilities area. So it's a thought, but I'm not ready to move that portion now, that additional portion, but certainly the 1.2 I would certainly agree with.
Anybody else? Yes, Roberta.
So I just want, so if there's, Mr. McDonald doesn't have a compelling reason, feels like this is a bad idea, I'd be in support of moving more, just because we have not been able to adequately fund the fund balance for several years now, and I think it's also makes it clearer for the taxpayer that it's going, you know, to something concrete, and it doesn't just go into the general fund, and we know that we'll use it, right? So I like to have the flexibility of having the opportunity to use it, but I think it would be a good time, since we have the authorized fund, to do that. But I do, you know, want to make clear, we have been, you know, coming in with revenues slightly over expenses, but we've also had our capital contribution below the line for, I think, as long as I've been on board, maybe the first year we haven't, but it hasn't been built in the budget like it needs to be, and we haven't had reliable surpluses like we did in the past when we build up something and then transfer it over. So I would like to have, if we're going to have more information, would we get it then at that board meeting and have a discussion, or how would the information come?
Go ahead. I was just gonna ask earlier, when Mary Garrett made that comment, what additional information would you need to make the decision? I guess that's similar to your question. But that was my question.
Up to me.
Well, to both of you, since you're asking, what do we get additional information? I guess what would you need to make a decision?
You know, I feel like I visually, in a way, need to see it, like we're talking about it, but I need to see it kind of broken down in a way that I can really see. And I think part of it is, like, I understand that we still have $7.4 million that's still in our authorized spend. And maybe it's just having come onto the board when we had to open up the, make changes in the AFR and new financial reports from 2016, 2017, and 2017, 2018. So I personally have this nervousness about how much we moved, because we couldn't do any more than what we did because of the authorized spend. So that's just, I'm just being honest, that's where I'm coming from. So I just feel like I need to see it, like in a concrete number, and maybe it's because I'm new. But I just need to see it broken down in some more visual way.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to show you audited financial statements, but I can give you a summary, a couple of numbers together.
And you can speak to what I'm talking about also, but I think that's part of my nervousness, and maybe I don't know enough to know that it's unfounded, but that's kind of how I came onto the board in the middle of that.
Would,
None of those, sorry.
I said, would it be useful if, for a visual, to sort of see that money injected into the capital sources and uses? For me, is that something that we could do and sort of say, well, if you did authorize 4 million, this is what this would look like? Would that be helpful?
Yes, that would be super helpful.
Right, and understand, and even if we do it sounds like even if we did the 4 million, we still have 3 million left in authorized spending.
I hear that.
Which is still a large number. Yes,
And I'm one vote, right.
I asked the question, I guess I would just ask, do you have a recommendation one way or the other? Is the only reason that we're doing 1.2 because that's what the board authorized, or do you think that's actually the more appropriate thing to do, and we're going off the rails here?
No, not at all. The reason that we're talking about 1.2 is because that's what the board authorized and approved in the 18-19 budget. And the additional monies that we're talking about this year are, excess that you could then contribute to the general fund, and we have a need for it, and it makes sense. And it's going to reduce what you're going to borrow because you need so much. So if you need so much, you can put some cash in there, and so much is going to get smaller. So you're going to have to borrow less. It's all going to depend on what the market is and how much you're going to save. But the logic's always been the more we can put in of reserves, the better off we are on a borrowing perspective. I don't know if I'd move prior year money and go up to that number, because that's something you can do at another time. You could plan for that. You could actually put it into the budget the way we did when we wanted to spend down or contribute to a project. You could budget that in 2021 and say, let's put an extra $3 million in contingency. You can then put it in as a capital fund transfer, and then we can talk about it. We can do that often if it's there.
So are you saying that you preferred that we should do that, or that the 4 million is?
No, I'm saying everything over the 4 million, like we have room. If we have 7 million of room in authorized spending, I would say, move the excess and talk about the 3 when you can budget it. Because it's really a prior year amount that you contributed, prior year contributions of fund balance that would be that additional 3.
So, what I'm hearing generally here is, and folks feel correct if I'm wrong, is that everybody's comfortable with the 1.2, moving the 1.2 million over. So we'll do that, and then we'll consider for approval at the next board meeting whether we want to move more over. Up to, at this point, it looks like $4 million. And so, we'll all talk amongst one, take our own counsel, think about that on our own, perhaps get some additional information from the administration, or ask questions about the administrations. We're certainly, we don't have to, on a one-on-one basis, we don't have to have it in this meeting to ask questions of either, or any of us can go to them and ask them if there's some piece of information that you want, or for purposes of that. But with the anticipated idea that we are going to discuss at some level, move an additional $2.8 million over, because we have the money in the authorized spend. Okay, that all make sense? Is that
Thanks,
good?
I'll
I'll get
instruct,
you in a second.
I'll instruct the auditors of the 1.2.
Right, and, right, and then sort of, maybe say, and just in case,
I'll tell them about the
be
discussion.
ready, so,
We'll inform the
you
discussion.
can hit that button, maybe, so. Neil, you have a.
Yeah, question. I didn't see the $5.5 million, swing from, loss to profit in the minutes of tonight's meeting, can you distribute that even in the minutes from this meeting into the public and tell us what those items were?
We did,
Were they?
you came in late, so we went through them.
I know, but they weren't written anywhere. I couldn't print them
Right,
out.
but they weren't in the
I
packet.
live in the last century. I
Yes,
didn't print
okay,
this
so
out.
maybe it's part, yeah, we will.
The minutes.
Yeah, they'll certainly, let's put it this way, certainly for purposes of the audit meeting that we're having in November, they're gonna be in there in excruciating detail, right? But I hear what you're saying, that you want to summarize somewhere. We had another question, yes, your name so that we can,
My name is Heather O'Mara,
okay?
and I'm a taxpayer and a parent. And the thing that I think is kind of funny is, we're talking about moving money around, and I completely understand that, but my big concern is getting my kids to and from school. And it is.
We're not there yet, so we're not.
I want to know where I can go, so I can tell somebody what's going on.
Wait, we've got an agenda, we've got things that we're gonna talk about.
Okay.
We'll talk about it.
Understand it's at the end.
Jamie, I was gonna tell her.
So I thought we were.
I
apologize.
Yes, we've got a public comment section, and I recognize that there are people who probably want to talk about that, so, in this session, so we'll get there. Trust me.
Don't worry, I'll get to busing, but at the end. I have a quick question. Amanda Wallach. I have 4 kids in the district. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. I've been in here for almost an hour, and most of it sounds like in foreign language. So I'm going to try and break it down to how I would understand it. Is this movement of money, is it kind of similar to like me refinancing my mortgage, so to speak, where I'm taking the equity out of my house and putting it because I'm going to be using it later?
No.
I came in a little late too, so I'm just trying to understand.
This is more like you're thinking about buying a house,
Okay.
right? And that past year, that year before you bought the house, you're buying the house, you're gonna get that mortgage, you said, you know what, I got a bonus, I somehow got some income that I wasn't expecting, and so what do I do with this extra $20,000, $50,000 worth of income that I got from a bonus, or I won the lottery, or I got an inheritance or something? What do I do with that? Should I keep it in my savings account and, earn interest and or spend it on other things? Or should I put it as a down payment on my house, more of a down payment on my house, so I can borrow less going forward? So you think of the Conestoga addition as our house?
Right.
Right?
Got it.
And
No,
so-
I got it now.
Okay.
So it's not like it's not like you're taking that money and reinvesting it. We're basically pre-priming what we're going to spend it for.
We are putting it down, we are putting more of a cash payment down on building.
Okay, makes sense now.
Okay,
Thank you.
You're a person.
Okay. All right. I think our instructions there are clear. Let's move on to our budget development calendar. Is that next? That's number 4, yes? I'm reading. Oh, that's what I forgot. I got distracted. My bad. All right, you were going to say one more thing on capital funding. Just a preview. So.
Right, so in the packet is the capital source and use, and I'm not going to go into it, I just put it in there because we're talking about capital funding, and it's what facilities is going to discuss after the next meeting. They're going to be really talking about what the infrastructure projects are and what they're going to be looking at next summer. And that's going to build some of this, and then we're going to also be looking at the out years of that, and then we're going to be talking about the borrowing. So facilities is going to come up with a number that they're going to say the finance that we need for the next couple of years based on what's happening in the infrastructure report. And as part of that process in the past, we've used an underwriter, which has been Benny and Scattergood, and we talked about having an FA this year. So we talked to a couple people over the last number of years, actually. We've been talking to FAs for a couple of years, just getting counsel from them, not in a contractual way, but just talking to them about what they're doing. So there's a company called PFM, it's Public Financial Management. They are actually number one in the state and number one in the nation with financial advice and being independent financial advisors to municipal governments and borrowing. So I'd like to bring them in soon to a future meeting to make a presentation to you. We're recommending that we use them in the next borrowing cycle. And they can talk about the other schools they work with. They work with pretty much every school in this area, and I know they've done work with pretty much every school that has a AAA bond rating in the state. There aren't many. They think they've worked with everyone but Tredyffrin. So they'll be able to tell you what they do and what their services are. And I'd like to leave that into a discussion with Benny and Scattergood. They have both of them at the meeting. They've worked together before. PFM's worked with Benny many times, so it's not unusual for them. So we're going to be recommending using PFM as the FA and doing.
PFM as the FA?
Financial advisor.
No,
Yeah,
just
right.
alone.
Right, financial advisor. The independent financial advisor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and, you know, we're gonna be talking about doing borrowing sooner rather than later. We have a timeline to put the bid out in late winter, early spring. So, you know, wanna look at that and what that means. And, you know, to Neil's point, the market's at all-time lows right now, so it's a good time to talk about it. So you can direct how you want that to happen. December, we could bring them in. I know November's going to be a pretty weighty agenda with everything, but we could bring them in before that too. But they're available in December to come to the meeting. They could do a facilities meeting if that was more convenient, but I thought having them here at finance made more sense. But they could come to either one. They said they would come to the meeting.
All right,
Okay.
thanks. I mean, that makes sense. Do folks have questions about that? I mean, at this point, we're talking about looking into their services as a financial advisor. And what I guess what I'm saying is that they're gonna come in and give us a little presentation as to why, you know, what they can offer for us, given what we need to get done from a borrowing perspective over the next, you know, 12 to 18 months, 6 to 18 months. Yes, Michelle.
So I feel like this has been long overdue. I've been talking about this probably for over a year, that we needed to have somebody from outside the district, so this makes me very happy to hear about this. I'm just wondering, given that we just spent an hour discussing whether to move money or not, do they need to be a part of that discussion? Would that be something that they talk about on a holistic, in a holistic way based on what we're trying to achieve with financing and budgeting and all of that? And would it make more sense to have them come sooner versus later? But it sounds like we have to talk to them first to see what they offer, and the board would have to authorize hiring them, and then.
Right. You want to hear a presentation from them. They don't give financial advice about budgeting or things like that. They'll tell you probably everything that you already heard here tonight, which is if you can put more money in capital to spend on capital funding and borrowing less, that'd be a good thing. That's what they tell you. So I don't think they give you advice on how much to move and what the dollar amount is. They would say that's totally up to you. They could give you opinions and say, if you move more, you can borrow less, but we've already talked about that.
So what are the benefits of bringing them in then, if they're gonna give us the same
They're gonna look at-
information you just gave us?
Right, they're gonna look at just, you know, advising us on the borrowing itself, just the borrowing. So if you go to borrow, that's what they're advising you on. They're not advising like outside of that, that's their job. And it's municipal government, so they work with townships too. I know they work with Tredyffrin.
Now, I guess my other question is, have you looked into other firms that do this?
We looked at a lot of firms, but I wanted to go to the best and the number one in the state, so that's why I went to PFM. And I know their services, and I know their references, and I know the schools they work with, and stellar.
Thank you.
Okay? Yes, Ed?
Just an obvious point, this is not the sort of thing you'd want to competitively bid, you want the best, right?
Yeah, I mean, you may have been there when they used it. Tredyffrin's used it quite a few times.
Oh, the township used it.
Yes, the township has used them.
And the county too, Chester County.
Okay.
In their law. I think they've worked with, I want to say 300 schools maybe. It's a lot of schools in Pennsylvania. So.
Okay.
All right, so we'll look forward
Okay.
to that presentation at some point, either in November or December, or,
Yeah, you know, if it's okay, I can put it in December, unless you
Okay.
want to do it at facilities.
I'd have to talk to Michelle about that.
All right, well, we can decide.
That's her meeting, so,
Yeah, we're good in the schedule.
better than not to intrude on Michelle's meetings. I was thinking about which one's gonna be longer. If I schedule that presentation there, she'd accuse me of stacking her meeting. All right, okay, so now can we move on to the budget
Yes,
calendar?
absolutely.
Thank you.
So in the packet on page 48 is our budget calendar. And there's not, I mean, other than finance committee and board meetings, in the near future, the first time we'll really look at budget for 2021. And just for informational purposes, just today, we released all the budgeting information to the departments and buildings, so they're now beginning to build their budget for next year. And it's October, they're building the budget for July of next year. So it's a long time out to build this, and we'll continue to do that for the next month or so. We'll put it together and we'll bring you the first blush of that on December 9th at that finance committee meeting. And then we'll talk about what that looks like for January, and then we'll release it. Now we're meeting on January 6th. This year's a little later than normally is. It's usually the second or third, but it's going to be the 6th this year. And we'll put that budget on display and talk about what that looks like for eligible exceptions. We'll do those calculations, show them to you, and give you those options and the universe of what your options are at that point. And that's kind of the short calendar up till January, of the preliminary budget.
All right, folks have any questions about the calendar? No? All right. All right, now we're at the section on committee goals. I'm sorry, what?
They're fine.
Now, I had actually, last meeting, we had a discussion about committee goals, and as you'll see in your packet here, we had some potential changes to those goals. In the interim, we also had a monthly full board meeting where we talked about the district goals, which are slightly different than these types of things. But in that discussion, there were some suggestions about financial goals, at least in terms of the district, and perhaps whether those should be incorporated, or these should somehow be some of the thoughts that were in that meeting morphed into here. And then subsequent to that, Mr. Sweeney had circulated to me and to other members of, and eventually got circulated to every other member of the board, some suggestions that he had with respect to at least items for consideration in terms of the budgeting process, and how perhaps maybe those could be either incorporated as goals or as a going forward practice, but certainly ideas on how to revamp or change our budgeting process going forward. And so I don't want to provide any more background than that, because they were Ed's things. So, but I thought that that was also an appropriate place to at least start the discussion associated with those items, at least in this category of public comment, and perhaps any follow-up that folks had with respect to either our discussions from the last finance committee meeting or the last board meeting. So it's a bit, I appreciate that it's a bit amorphous at this point in terms of sort of all the stuff that I chucked into the committee goals portion of it, but I think it's a good spot to at least start to that. Now, you know, the stuff that Ed had circulated, I appreciate that folks haven't necessarily had a long time to digest this, so I imagine that that's going to be a longer conversation than tonight. So, but with that intro, I don't know if anybody on the committee wants to say anything, but if not, I mean, I'll at least let Ed give some background about his thoughts and motivation behind this, his suggestion. So, okay?
I'm okay.
Okay. Ed, if you want.
Yeah, I just, forest fruited trees and, you know, forest fruited trees, you know, we've had some intense budget processes lately where we're really drilling down, you know what I mean, on various specifics of low priority, moderate priority items, you know, and I think it's been a productive process in the sense that I think we truly, you know, have been looking at specifics, and, you know, the democracy, you know, is taking place. You know, we're deciding what we want to do, you know, as far as cutting, but and spending and prioritizing, but still, you know, as some of the comments made today, you know, we need to use this budgetary process as a tool for us, right, to be able to make decisions in real time, right? We can't, you know, when we hear about an overage like $4 million when we predicted a budget, it's something that basically somewhat undercuts the process that we went through. You know what I mean? Because basically we're not really getting to the specifics that of the decision that I think we need to make. And basically a lot of these proposals that I've been making is to try to, you know, find a productive and challenging way to address a situation that will help us be better board members and decision makers. You know, I'm not always sure that it's going to change everything, you know what I mean, but, you know, my vote might have changed, you know, a year ago, you know, or even this year, right, if I knew where we're, you know, coming out right now, you know, and I think, you know, we have to set the tone, right, for the whole district, right, as to, you know, what we find, what our expectations are going to be as far as process. Now, it may be that other districts do it exactly the same way, and basically there are these variances, and they, you know, are basically difficult to predict, and we can't do anything about it. I suspect that might not be the case, but I don't know, you know. But, I mean, as Bill Bellevue was saying, you know, this is what he would expect, a variance approach, you know. And basically, things germinate over time if you, you know, do things the same way and you don't challenge yourself to get into a better place, you know. So I guess that's what prompted the thought process, is that, you know, I think, you know, these proposals aren't the only things that could be part of the discussion, but I think challenging ourselves to, you know, try to get one of the awards for, you know, budget processing as being, you know, one of the better budget processings. There is such an award. I think the particular one that I mentioned was with the Association of School Business Officials International. I don't know enough about it, so I proposed or an alternative. That's one goal. Proposing a balanced budget or a similar equivalent. A first draft of balanced budget for board review without the use of the fund balance. So enhanced revenue might be a useful tool. And there's various specific things that would require a deeper dive, but are generally in the nature of giving the board more information to be able to make, more micro decisions, in budget understanding. So I think, we can improve the budget process, and I think, I would hope that we can challenge each other and the community and the administration to try to come together and figure out a way what is the best budget processing that we can have.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Anybody have sort of any other, I appreciate that, we've maybe had 24 hours to digest. I digest this, so I don't necessarily expect folks to have concrete thoughts about any of these items, or even the whole concept in and of itself. But we're certainly, and I anticipate that this is going to be a discussion that goes, like I said, that goes beyond this meeting. So don't feel compelled to say, here, speak now, forever hold your peace kind of thing. But if folks feel like they want to add something, certainly now is a time to do so. Yes, go ahead, Kate.
So, again, we just got this like a day ago, but I think I generally agree. I'm not sure, I do agree, I think tonight's, the $5.5 million swing is sort of more reason to look more closely at the process and to make sure that we're doing the best we possibly can. It may be that we are, but we need to, I think, just do another look at that to make sure that we are. And I think Ed's goals speak to that in many ways. I don't know how to merge the committee goals with Ed's goal. Like, I don't have a good plan for that tonight, but I think I want to work on it. Like, I think there is a lot of good here, and I think it would be good for us as a board, and I think the whole idea of challenging ourselves and challenging the administration to provide something that helps us do this job better is a worthy goal. So, is it okay if we keep looking at this, and then, that's what you said, right? Like, okay. I think I'd like to keep looking at it
We're
and
not
figure
doing
out
an
the
up or
best
down
way.
thing on any of these, or
Okay.
even the concept that this is something that we're going to ruminate on.
But everything you wrote was, I agree with, so I just don't know the best way to make it happen. Okay.
Mary, you look like you want to speak.
Well, I'm just thinking, as we look at, what Ed's proposing, Ed, am I understanding you correctly, you're proposing for the committee goals?
Yeah.
Is that for the finance committee goals, is that your thought?
My thought that this is primarily a finance committee topic, right? So it would have to go through the finance committee, right? And, although my initial thought was, that some of this could have been in the annual goal, particularly the balanced budget, and we had that discussion. And I'd still say that's an idea that we can still entertain, but basically, and I'd like it to be entertained, if there's that or other steps that we can do and get them into the annual goals. But as Rich said, it's, as time goes on, it's going to become more difficult to do that. So we have to move on one or two of these goals if it was to be in the annual goals. But basically, yes, I don't know how I would word it to put it in the committee goals, But basically, I think some of this is pretty close already, you know, with the underlines, it's generic enough to cover, you know, some of this, you know, with the underlines. I mean, I think monitor other districts' Act 1 budget development approaches is very much consistent with what, you know, their budgeting process. What do they do? What do they report? How do they, you know, look at expenditures? How do they look at revenues? You know, are we doing the same assumptions? That sort of thing. But yes, that's, I think, putting this more specifically into a committee goal might be good. That generically we'd be looking at improving the budgetary process and also soliciting ideas from, you know, everybody, including the board, you know, the administration, you know, and people in the public. I mean, the last goal I had was to have, you know, maybe a board appointed, right, 6 to 12 citizen volunteers from the TESD community with significant and financial and professional acumen to help give us advice. You know, I think that's, you know, opens up the process and allows us to get some more, you know, things on the table that might be helpful.
So, thanks, Ed. So, Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Kantorzik, so how do you, in terms of responding to the committee goals, do you want us to send you ideas individually? Like how do you want to move forward?
Well, I think before we send individual ideas on the, well, I'd like people to ruminate on this a bit, I think. And feel free to reach out then to me directly, at least for now. Stuff turns over in December, so, and who knows what this committee is going to look like after December. So, but up until then, I mean, obviously, if you have feedback or stuff or thoughts on how to provide an opportunity to discuss these things, or even if you have initial thoughts on some of these things, substantively, feel free to do that, and then it'll be incumbent upon me to sort of say, okay, well, let's provide a vehicle to have that discussion, at least in this committee at the outset, and then we can see from there. This is kind of a, you know, a ground level thing at this point, and so we'll see how it evolves and develops. But you know, whether it becomes a goal, whether it becomes just sort of a practice, whether it just becomes a direction that we give to the administration as part of the budgeting process, is you know, all those things are sort of on the table, I guess, when you talk about some of these things. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sure. Hey, Michelle?
I think that we probably, at this hour, need to table this. We just got this, and there's a lot of people that have been waiting a long time to talk to us about their topic for public comment. So I'd like to, although I appreciate the work that Mr. Sweeney did on this, and we have talked about this as a board, looking at different ways to look at our budgeting process, I think at this point and at this hour, we keep this for either November or December as committee goals, and we move on to the public comment section so that people can talk about what they came here to talk about, if that's okay.
That's fine with me. I don't know if the board, and I don't know if the folks in the public want to speak about that, or we can talk about that in public comment if you want, but I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that this conversation and what Ed has really written were things that really came from our board meeting. And in that discussion, we had a vote, and I thank Mr. Kantorzik for bringing those, as he stated, he would take those conversations from the board meeting that were originally wanting a desire to put in our goals, and we said that we would put it, or discuss it within our financial committee. And so that's part of what we're going through. Now, it certainly doesn't have to be the end all tonight. My thought was, as many of you already said, is to look at it, not sit on it, but look at it, because sit on it means something different. To me, it does. But look at it and then come back with conversation and give it your thoughts. I think it's a good thought process to look at. We may agree on some. I know Ed and I have been back and forth on some points and looked at it, especially some of the latter points. But I look at the system as a sense that some may say it's broken, some may say it needs fixing, that we can always improve, that we can always be better. That no matter how good we think we are, we can do better. Because, as Ed has stated in his comments and others, that the reality of it is we need the best information to do our job in making a decision of what our budget will be. And, you know, if I look back and we were facing cuts and different things that could have been major decisions. And so we need every piece of critical evidence to make decisions. And however we can do that and providing that information, I'm always for it. So moving forward, I just would ask the board to, again, give it some critical thoughts, some analyzing in each of your points, and as we come back in our next meeting, let's continue to draw down and get to some points in it. All right, thank you.
I completely agree. I mean, maybe one of the most important, if not the most important function that we have here is to set the budget and priorities associated with that, and anything that can help me individually with that process is welcome. And so I mean, that is what I'm going to be, the lens through which I'm going to be looking at these. What is here that's going to help me be able to make that decision and do what we've been elected to do, which is make choices when it comes to budgeting and how the taxpayers' money is spent on our education here in the community. So, okay. With that, we're just gonna segue right into public comment at this point. But Bill, you look like you want to talk about this very quickly, or?
No, I came tonight to ask a very specific question of Art.
Okay, well, why don't you ask it?
I'll ask it through you.
Why don't you ask it to me, and we'll.
In the capital sources and uses chart, you've got Conestoga High School expansion plan, and over on the right-hand side it says $30.5 million. I know that's not the total number that is on the Conestoga High School website. There are a lot of other things, I understand that. But in that $30,526,000, how much is for the parking lot?
Yeah, I don't know that, sorry.
You know, I gotta say this.
I don't think we ever broke it out, did we? Yeah, it was never broken out, I don't think, by the architect. The
How did you get the
remaining
$30
amount,
million fine?
the remaining amount of the 39, in case, just for anybody sitting here that may not know, it's down under professional fees and district costs and contingencies, which is where we put our soft costs. So the numbers that are up above in this report only represent the estimated or projected construction costs, not all the other fees. So to answer your question, we haven't presented that publicly. I don't believe the architects have ever given that number as a separate.
I'm confused then. How do you put together a budget, a proposed budget even, without having a pretty good idea what your costs are going to be?
Well, it's in there. It's not.
Yeah, but how much is it?
In there, but, well, it's all one project. The board's not evaluating it as two projects, it's one project.
And as a member of the community, and you know where I'm going with this, there are a bunch of us that don't agree with that parking lot. And this is the second time I've asked the question, how much of your budget is just for the parking lot?
two different budgets, what we were discussing earlier is the general fund budget, this is the capital budget, so it's not the same process that we talked about at length here. And I don't recall when you asked that before. in a
When
finance
we
meeting.
all met individually. We had a meeting with the,
You weren't there.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
you
I
weren't,
wasn't-
you weren't there.
I wasn't at the meeting, I'm sorry.
okay.
Right. And I think the answer is, I think the answer at that point was, we didn't know. And because it wasn't broken out that way, because it was treated as one, it's treated as one project. The answer today still is, I don't know off the top of my head, but, you know,
We'll have it.
we can, it's knowable, so we'll get it.
We'll have it on the 15th, Michelle.
We have a meeting on the 15th.
That would be helpful.
So at the facility meeting, you'll have that answer.
Yep.
Please come.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Don't fight.
Other public comment. Yes, you've been very patient.
Yes, thank you. So I want to propose
Can I have your
spending.
name, please?
Tatiana Lutsik, L-U-T-S-I-K.
Can you say that again, please?
Tatiana Lutsik, L-U-T-S-I-K.
Did you sign in?
Yes.
At the front? Okay, so just,
Yes, I want to propose high priority spending. We are quite wealthy district and we still do not have busing tracking. So the apps are out there, there are a bunch of them, and one of the best ones with the best ratings by Synovia Solutions. So we already have GPS in our buses, why don't we have tracking? It would be, you know, it would make our life so much easier.
so this is a request to investigate tracking software.
Yes.
That, a tracking app that parents can use.
Exactly. The name of the app is Here Comes the Bus by Synovia Solutions. They have the best ratings.
Right, yeah, we're familiar. I think we talked at our last finance meeting, I'm not sure if you were here, but we talked about when things calm down, we'd be investigating that and then bringing it back to the committee with the recommendation.
Is there a time limit there?
We didn't place any timeline when we
Is it
discussed it.
possible to place it?
I don't want to say for sure when the board would decide based on what our recommendation is, but I'd say in the next couple of months, we should be able to come back. It may not be at finance, but we would come back to the board at some point.
Jane?
Just to tag on to Tatiana's question, at the last meeting, we did talk about it because it was there, and we talked about looking at the splitting of our current software that. Yes, because it comes with that, right? It's an option, well, we didn't pay for that option, but it's a possibility because it's provided by that company. So did, in this month time, did nobody look into that? Because that was definitely discussed as it was something that we would look into, and I didn't recall that it was gonna be pushed off for a few months, because it was a pretty big concern of a lot of people, including me, as a farmer, type 1 diabetic, and I'd like to know where he is on the bus.
Do you want to answer?
Well, I mean, we're doing what we need to do in transportation to make sure that, you know, kids are getting to school on time. We're addressing a lot of other concerns, so it has not been the priority of transportation to look into software and make recommendations. So I'm not aware of anything that's been done with Power School unless Mike knows anything different.
I think she's referring to Versatrans, not Power.
That's what I'm
Okay. Versatrans is something different, but we know that option's out there. But there are a lot of different software apps out there, and I don't think we want to look at any one in particular. We want to look at all of them.
Well,
and
that
make a
one would
recommendation.
connect with our current system we already have. So
Right.
if it was me in that situation, it would be the first one I'd look at.
Right,
But-
unfortunately, that's not really the major variable. It's more about the contractor's system that they have and what we can do with their buses. So it's their GPS system, not ours. So we don't own our own buses, so you can't look at another school that owns their own buses and make a comparison to ours because it's totally different. So we have to work with the contractor to determine what's even possible within their GPS
So
system.
the Versatrans is our routing software,
Right.
and they have, I put it together,
They have a
software.
GPS software that does all the tracking.
Okay, so we can't see with our Versatrans where the buses are at all.
No, we can see them, but what happens with the bus app is controlled by the GPS software, which is run by the contractor. So it's a
So
little
like
more,
we're allowed to track, it's like they gave us access to track it
correct,
through their GPS
correct,
and we can follow it.
correct.
Got it.
So there's variables that are different than some other schools that maybe can control their GPS system, we can't. And it all depends on what theirs is and the speed of it, there's some different variables, but we also want to look at what's out there. So.
Can we allocate, I mean, this is, you know, I know we came up with a lot of surprises this year, but it seems to me like it would make a lot of sense. There are so many people out there, even though they may not all be sitting here tonight, we all know that happens.
Sure, that's what we're gonna look at.
But saying we're gonna look at it and some point in the future, I think people would really appreciate hearing, you know, we're gonna have an initial, report, you know, on what we can do within a month, you know, and.
I think that what Art is trying to say is that, you know, from, certainly based upon the feedback that we got at the last meeting and even at the last board meeting, is that, you know, the priority issue that transportation department is trying to deal with is getting the kids to and from school as close to the time, their scheduled times as possible. And so that has taken up the resources of the.
I understand that, but this is a technology. I'm assuming that transportation isn't going to be the one investigating whether the app is the right app and whether it fits with our technology that we currently have. I would assume that our technology and our transportation folks would be working together to make that, you know, make that determination. And I can't imagine that Karen Henry is the only one who could do that. Maybe she is, we should
You're right,
think about that.
it's transportation and technology, and transportation would run point on investigating what's out there. Because they have the most connections to what's already being used by other schools, because they work directly with the people, transportation directors that already, you know, there's a lot of schools that put those in, taking them out, so there's a lot of data out there to talk about what other schools are using and how it applies. So that'll be part of our investigation.
Kyle?
So between Mr. McConnell and Dr. Simondero, do we have an idea of when we might be able to fulfill that information request, or that's, I don't know if ceiling is the right word, but
yeah,
do we have a time frame? Because it seems like folks want some sort of a time frame, and I'm always being conservative about what we promise, but I think that we might alleviate a little bit of stress if we could give the time frame on that.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, probably, I said the next couple of months, so, next couple of months, November.
2 months?
2 months, 5 months, 10 months. The next couple months could be next, you know,
August.
August.
The next 2 months, the next 60 days, probably by the end of the year, I mean, we only have 2 more meetings, so.
So by December for facilities or for the board, by what December meeting?
No.
I mean, finance, I don't know why I said facilities, I'm just thinking about capital projects.
So by December, the next meeting we have is November 11th and then December 9th.
So I'm gonna ask Mr. Kantorsik, or the powers that be, if we can just say by this meeting.
We'll talk about it, okay, fine. And my powers are very limited. But,
More power than you think, Tom.
but,
We'll bring,
No, we're great.
we'll bring our recommendation back to the committee by December 9th.
okay.
Thank you.
That'll work. Thank you.
Okay, Neil.
Yeah, a couple quick points. I saw Ed's recommendation for some of your goals. So one important concept that's in there is that the budget process starts with a balanced budget without using fund balance or reserves. So this forces the administration into what you don't know how to do, which is cut a budget that has a big deficit hole, right? You're pushed into the only way you can fill this hole is to raise taxes. So this, you don't have to accept that budget, but at least it gets you a starting point that says balance without using fund balance. That's an important concept because it's work that you can't do. You don't know the numbers that well. And I know it's hard for you. I can see you're talking about below the line, above the line, transfer fund balance, right? It's a little easier if you know numbers or that's what your training is. And I appreciate that you're all smart, but you don't have that training, and that's fine. Force the people to do to do that work for you. Give you a budget, start with a budget that's balanced, then decide what you add to it. You'll know what is then on the table to create a balanced budget. Let's talk about this year's surplus. So now you have a $4 million surplus. That's last year. That's actual, or as close to actual as we know today. Your tax increase was $4.38 million. That was this year's tax increase. You needed $380,000 of it if you used last year's surplus to fund this year's education. You didn't know it at the time, but you should have, right? Because somebody would have said, we don't need a tax increase. I mean, that would have been at least on the table, especially in an election year. Somebody would have brought it up. It's important to get good information on a timely basis. Historical perspective. So, and PFM is going to talk to you about some of this. There's an article in the Inquirer today, not very, it wasn't a good article for them, but I think it was a little unfair. It dealt with some school districts. They got into swaps and lost some money. You're not going to be a swap player. You're a long-term fixed-rate borrower. Historically, at least in the 15 years or 13 that I've been watching it, you make, from time to time, you make a contribution to the capital fund. You don't contribute regularly to the capital fund until maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. I think Virginia Lassner did it. Now, remember this. Your operating budget, your operating fund, pays all the debt service, about $7 million a year. So that is a capital contribution. PFM is going to talk to you about getting that where potentially it should be, which is over in the capital fund, making one large contribution. They'll talk to you through those things. So you do make a contribution in paying for all the debt service, for all the money that's used in capital. So it's going to be a bigger discussion with PFM, and you should appreciate if you're going to hire them. I think they'll help you see things a little different here, get straight. So the reason you started making contributions to the capital fund was because you're running surpluses, right? So that's kind of the position you're in today. And it also acknowledges the contribution to the capital plan out of operating. It's not a bad concept, but you're missing the whole story because you're already paying for all the debt that's being used by the capital plan. So, you know, maybe you'll start getting all that together. It'll be a little more clear capital and operating to you. Because right now you're kind of mixed on those few things. PFM's good. They'll help you on those things. So that is the end of my bullet points. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Folks have other comment? Yep. Oh, here we go. Name?
Amanda Neal.
Okay.
This is my first meeting about the busing issues. I knew that at the beginning there would be lots of things to work out. I tried to be as patient as possible. My concern is it being acceptable that a 5-year-old is on the bus for 47 minutes before the bus stop, and that's if there's no traffic, no weather delay, etc. That's very hard to deal with. I don't live that far from the school. Second, I understand that kindergarten transportation the other way is not guaranteed. I know it's very common, and this year 23 of us apparently in New Eagle were denied it. And I've asked to appeal that, and I haven't heard back from transportation in 5 days if there's such a process.
Second part I can address because principal shared that information with me last week. And what transportation was responding to is there are 2 conditions where they could grant that second way transportation for kindergarten without adding a stop, but also if there was available spaces on the bus.
Right.
And that is in a district administrative regulation that that number be 55. So there were buses where that could be granted, but also when that exceeded 55, I understand those families began being informed that there wouldn't be a spot on the bus. When I learned about that, I asked them to stand down those approvals and denials so that we could examine that. And but I did talk to Karen, and we feel that the 55 number is pretty rigid because it really has secondary students in mind. especially because that's based on a rostering number, not necessarily actually a ridership number. So we are going to change that administrative regulation. We're bringing it to policy committee next month, and we're going to raise that number for elementary school. This is just decided and worked out today. So beginning tomorrow, transportation will be notifying those families, some of whom were told they could not be accommodated. I expect that, I don't know that all, but I expect that many, many more, if not all, of those requests will be able to be honored with that different interpretation of the regulation. So I regret that you've received that first denial. When it came to my attention, we tried to work out a solution, and we hope to have that in place tomorrow.
Thanks, Rich. Any other public comment? Amanda?
How are you? So I come to a lot of these meetings complaining about our busing issue. The other day I got the joy of putting two of my children on a bus and driving one because she hates riding it. So every once in a while I give her that little pleasure. And I arrived to school at, I'm going to say about, give it a minute or two, at 8:54, 8:55-ish. And my daughter's bus strolled in about maybe a minute later behind me, and she sat on that bus for 15 minutes while she waited to get out. So I keep being told by Karen Henry that my child is not on the bus that long. She's not riding the bus that long, because right now we're averaging about 72 minutes a day on the bus. We are 1.8 miles from school. My children get on the bus at 8:35 in the morning, and I may, if I'm lucky, on a good day, because my daughter naps, so sometimes I'm not able to get up to the bus stop, which is a whole nother issue. They moved me. It was averaging about 4:20 to 4:30. They changed my time to 4:16, so now instead of being 15 minutes late, it's like 10 minutes late. Last week it's been on time. But if you add that time up if you go by the time she should be getting on the bus, or even wait time, it is 72 minutes a day. Whether she's riding on that bus or not, that's every day. That comes out to be almost 6 hours a day that my child's basically doing nothing. She rode the bus last year for maybe 40 minutes tops both ways. And we were part of the whole redistricting fiasco. We were bus number 36. Y'all remember us, bus number 36. Now, my understanding is there's 2 buses in our neighborhood. We're split. I have been told that the bus cannot come down my street. I wouldn't know who I send the video to. Bus number 6 comes down my street every day. It comes down at 3:50. It drops off my neighbor who's a middle school child right in front of his house. No problems. So I want to know why my bus was moved all the way up the block, where my children have almost been hit by my neighbors running the red lights, by a distracted bus driver who I've addressed on more than one occasion, telling her to pay the frick attention because I have a sleeping child. I cannot get I just can't get up. I can't get up there. I can't leave a kid alone who's 1 and a half in a house. Why run up to make sure my kids don't get hit by a dying car coming down the street? Now there's a kindergartner who's been added to my bus stop, so the odds of me getting my bus stop moved are probably slim to none because they live up and around the corner. And I've asked about having the bus moved so that it drops our kids off on our street side, because I even talked with police to make sure this is right. They're not allowed to block an intersection. So I've asked if there was some way to reverse how she drops off, so that instead of the kids having to cross, it's not a busy street, but people don't pay attention. We know this. They speed everywhere. It's a 25-mile-an-hour zone, and they fly through that little section at about 35, which I know is not your issue. I've already asked the police to follow my bus, so they're well aware. So I asked this, I think, in the August meeting about having my bus looked at, if they can at least move it so the kids are getting left off coming down our street. I feel like at least they're not crossing that one section of street where I think people may think there's a gray area, I guess, when they see red flashing lights. I don't know. I mean, I'm the crazy lady who's always yelling at my own neighbors to slow the hell down on my own block, so I'm that mom. But
So those are all a lot of
issues.
a lot of issues,
Good
a lot of
stuff.
valid issues, right? So but we want to make sure that
Yeah.
they're vetted and addressed. So you know what number bus this is?
This is bus 11.
Right, so you were at the September.
I come to all them. You will see me until the bus problem is
But I think I
fixed.
told you at the September meeting.
Yeah, she
when
told
we
me at the
stopped.
September meeting you would let me know.
Right.
I still have heard
Well,
nothing.
we looked at the stop, I know, it was looked at by, we reviewed the stop location.
Okay, well, no one
I
told
think
me.
And I haven't seen the report yet, but I know he's looked at it
Okay.
because I just talked to him the
Oh,
other day.
good, let me
So,
send them some video of,
yeah,
the,
he has,
it was fun.
he'll give us a formal report on your
Okay.
stop, but what I was
Good, I
gonna
can't
ask,
wait.
what school?
so my daughter's,
school is
we're
it?
at Beaumont Elementary now,
Bowen.
yes.
So, unfortunately, we can't control the, I'm not sure.
Oh, I know, you can't control the
Sitting on
traffic
bus.
things, that's why I
Right.
went to the police and they said
Okay.
they will randomly follow the bus or they put an unmarked car, so I was like, oh yay, so the
So-
police are phenomenal, I know that's not your issue.
Okay, so when you mean sitting, you mean sitting like on Beaumont Road waiting to turn into the school?
I
or
mean, like
in
they're
front of the
sitting
school?
at school, no, they make it into the corral, I guess eventually, I don't normally drop off because
Okay.
pickup and drop off is like, gives me anxiety, like the people are crazy, like I can't stand the people, the lack of regard for other people's children in a bus zone in Tredyffrin-Easttown in general blows my mind, which is again not your problem, so it gives me anxiety. I think my kids are actually safer getting on the bus than me actually taking them in that car line, to tell you the truth. I'm afraid I'm gonna get hit by someone.
Okay, so I think I talked to Karen about this just the other day, so I know she said she was gonna reach out to you this week.
Yeah, I keep getting told that, but.
Well, I think, because we have to wait
Is
for
it for his
his
report?
and then,
Is there anything more that I can send? Because I mean, I know they come on just a random day, but in the course of 1 week, and this is dated video, I've videotaped a bus, because I have said this before, it's another bus stop for the school that's at the top of the block. So for 2 days in a row, I think it was Upper Marion, a bus was sitting at our bus stop. Last Friday, there was a mowing guy with his big truck backing up towards our bus as our bus was coming around the corner. So that's fun. So there's always something going on at this corner. And I have video of other people's parents, because again, it's a drop off at our bus stop, blocking our only corner to stand on so that they can, drop their kids off at a school, because where our bus stop is another bus stop for another school. I don't know what he's catching when he comes, but it's, that's the other thing. Like I can send it to him so he can make a very informed decision.
right, and that certainly impacts what he does, but he typically only comes out
Yeah.
one day and looks at it. We don't,
Right.
I mean, right now we have them going all over the place, so.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because we're evaluating, in addition to what Rich mentioned, we're also looking at actual bus stop change requests, which are, then you have to, once you get through those, if you don't know the stop, you have to go out and look at it. We do an analysis, then the safety guy might have to come in and do it, so he's running around doing a lot of that.
Is there any way for us to be told like the process of things? I feel like the lack of communication and just how a process works. Like if I knew all these steps, I wouldn't come to every board meeting and basically say the same thing over and over again on record. Some more transparency. I've been finding over the last 2 years with the start of our redistricting, how there's a total lack of transparency when it comes to stuff. Like, just tell us what the process, hey, this is the process, I don't know where you can put this, maybe, I don't know if you can put it on your website or something. These are the steps that need to be done before we can communicate to you. I would be a much more reasonable person if I knew there was those 10 steps. And now I'm not wasting another 2 hours of my life and not putting my kids to bed to come and try and figure out what the process is supposed to be.
Well,
Honestly, I would rather be home with my family.
It's unfortunate that no one reached out to you in between when you were here and when you came to the board meeting
Yeah.
now. And we would have told you that we were in the process of getting it reviewed and we were waiting on the report, so I apologize that you had to show up tonight. But it's not always the same process for every request or
Right.
every stop. I mean, obviously, we have rules online that are posted about how you request
Right.
a long-term exception to a bus assignment that's very detailed, those kinds of things. And there are a lot of things that are written up, but to make a bus stop request, we also have that detailed online. We just say we have to go out and review it or look at it, but it may or may not involve the actual safety officer. So
Gotcha.
it really depends on a case-for-case thing. But I'll make sure that she gets back to you, if not tomorrow, the next day.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Are we good? All right. I think we're adjourned. All right, thanks everybody for coming. Our next meeting is, when's our next meeting? Monday, November 11th. Thanks, everybody.
Only this year, this is only this year, it's only been, I've been through a redistricting, I've been, that's what I've been looking at. This year. change.
Good job.
Now,
I was thinking about it.
we changed our structure. With absolutely no regard to what kind of traffic. And they also changed the amount of time between elementary and middle school. Middle school backed up, then elementary. I just feel bad because my kids only come home now 45 minutes later. So they get home dinner time and it's like.
His brother went to doctor. I knew he was close.
He used to go over to
I got 2 more years left in this thing, maybe.
Appreciate you coming out.
Thank you. I couldn't do that. I couldn't have done that. I just, no, call Jamie. I said,